can we live with uncertainty? How can we respond? And naturally, there's all sorts of ways that we do respond when life becomes uncertain, maybe with fear and anxiety, and we just get paralyzed. Some of us will respond with denial, and we just pretend it's not happening and that everything's fine, and we just don't think about it. We don't think about the implications, and we just bury our head in sand, and we don't think about what's going to happen to our finances or our jobs. Or some of us, we have kind of what I call hyper control. I know sometimes I do that when one part of my life is uncertain. I try to have excess control in another part of my life. And maybe you found yourself making your house as clean as possible. Sometimes for me, it's exercise, and I'll train, and I'll run, and I'll try and go faster. And we can respond in all sorts of ways. But often our response isn't helpful. It's not healthy to be paralyzed with anxiety, or to have excess control in another area of our life, or to live in denial. But I think that faith has an amazing resource available for us. And those of us who are Christians, who maybe believe in God, sometimes when it comes to uncertainty, we actually become practical atheists. And so we just behave in the same way as anybody else. And what I want to do maybe just get us to think a little bit about what faith can offer us in terms of living with uncertainty. And we're going to look at a fantastic story in the book of Daniel, which is about Daniel in the Old Testament. And we're going to look at the first chapter of that story. And I think that's really helpful for us, because it becomes at a time of great uncertainty for God's people. And they'd had a season of certainty. They were certain about a number of things. They were certain that God was for them. He was on their side. They were certain, the people of God, that God had formed them as a nation. They were certain that God had given them some land to live in, and so they could live and set up laws and economics and farming and live as a community. And then they were certain that God was with them, because then they built a temple, and that was symbolic really of God's presence, that he was with them. And they were certain that God was with them, that they were his nation, and they had land, and they had temple, and so they had all aspects of their life sorted. And then Daniel chapter 1 begins with a story of uncertainty when it comes to the people of God, because Babylon was a nation next to Israel, and Babylon had grew and got stronger and stronger, and more of a threatening presence over Israel. And eventually, as Daniel starts at Daniel chapter 1, the first couple of verses, we find that Babylon, under the leadership of King Nebuchadnezzar, had become so powerful that they then decided to invade Israel, that they'd invaded their capital, Jerusalem, that they took over their land, that they entered the temple where God's presence was, and they took some sacred objects, some sacred vessels from the temple, so they could take it back and put it in their own temple as a sign that God had been conquered, that Israel had been conquered. And in that moment, it's hard to grasp how uncertain it all became. From living to a period of certainty, everything became uncertain. Everything that they knew before became unknown. You know, their religious life became unknown because God's temple got desecrated, and some stuff got took from it. That their economics became uncertain because their land was took from them. Their political life became uncertain because the key leaders got took out of Israel and away to Babylon. And Daniel chapter 1 is recorded just to help us understand, how do you live with uncertainty? What do you do? Because what naturally happens is when we face uncertainty, we tell a story. We tell a story of what's going on and what's happening. And the big danger for us, for people of faith particularly, is we tell a story as practical atheists. We tell a story based upon natural causes. So the natural cause in Daniel chapter 1 is this, that Israel is a small nation and Babylon is a powerful nation, and Babylon under their king Nebuchadnezzar has decided to invade Israel because they're stronger and they're more politically powerful, and so they've decided to take over. That's the story. And maybe in your uncertainty, you'll have a story that you tell, a natural story based upon what you can see. That your job has become uncertain because the coronavirus has come and your business might be closing. Or your story might be that you can't see your aging parents because you're not allowed to visit them. Or it might be that your household becomes very tense, maybe in your marriage or with your kids because of the intensity of that. It might be that your future has become unknown because you don't know what's going to happen when we come out of this crisis. You don't know going to be the state of your economy or the sector that you work in, and the future is unknown. And you have a story that you're telling based upon what you can see. And what Daniel chapter 1 does remarkably is this, and I think this is the key to this chapter, the key to help us live with uncertainty is this. That even though we're telling ourselves a story based upon what we can see, Daniel chapter 1, as we'll discover, and I'll pick up on a couple of verses from chapter 1, is this, that we discover that there's always a deeper story to be discovered. That the way to live with uncertainty is to know that there's a deeper story to be discovered. So right at the beginning of chapter 1, let me show me what I mean. In chapter 1, which tells the story of this king who invades Israel and he takes it over, is in verse 2 it says this. It says God gave him victory. God gave King Nebuchadnezzar, victory over Israel. Whereas there may be a natural story that he's a more powerful king, that he's got the military might, that he wants to take over other countries, so he decided to do that. That may be the natural story we tell. But the writer who records Daniel chapter 1 says this: God gave him victory. The reason that he invaded, the reason that he took over was because God gave him victory. And then it says that God allowed him, God permitted him to take some of the objects from the temple. Now, the natural story is to say, he took the objects because he wanted to take the objects, because he was in charge of the country, because he'd invaded it. And what kings always did is they take objects from the god of the country they invaded and took it to their temple so that it could kind of bow down to their god, as it were. And the natural story is to say that's what happened, but Daniel records it differently. In verse 2 it says not only did God give him victory over it, but actually God permitted, God allowed him to take the vessels from the temple. So one of the things that Daniel is trying to say to us, that even though there seems to be natural causes that's about military power and a king deciding, and even though that's led them into all sorts of uncertainty, that Daniel is actually saying that God gave, that God allowed, that actually beyond what you can see there's a deeper story, and as remarkable and as hard as it is to understand when you're in uncertainty, that actually there is a God and he is in control, that God is overseeing all things, that God is still working out his purposes. And it's hard to believe that sometimes when we see uncertainty, and that evokes all sorts of reactions in us, and we get focused on the natural situation in front of us. But Daniel 1, the writer records it. He says, actually, can you see there's a deeper story? That even though King Nebuchadnezzar has invaded and he's done all sorts of stuff, can you see there's a deeper working behind that God gave him that victory? That actually God himself allowed him to take those objects from the temple. And one of the things about when we live in certainty is that we can get tricked into an illusion. And the illusion is that the things we are relying on really do give us certainty. And so when things are certain, maybe our finances are certain, or our job's certain, or our health is certain, we can actually live under the illusion that we believe those things can be relied upon. That actually the reason our health is so good is because we're young and we're fit, or the reason our finances are so good is because we're so wise and clever with our money, or the reason that our future is certain is because we made the right choice of marriage partner, or we studied hard at university, or it's down to us. And when things are certain, we can live under the illusion that those things can be relied upon. But actually, really, I mean, it's just like this. You know, we have these bricks, which is our life, and we think it's so certain, and we think things are going so well, and we imagine that everything is okay. But actually, the foundations that we're leaning on are so vulnerable and so fragile, and just like that. But that's probably how it feels a little bit at the moment, doesn't it? The things that we've based our life on, they feel so fragile. It feels like we can't rely on those things anymore. And in one sense, when we go from certainty to uncertainty, as hard as it sounds, it can be a gift to us, because it can show us that the things we're relying on, the things that we thought were really solid pillars, actually could not take the weight of reality, and that the only reason that those things were certain, the only reason it was all going okay, was not because of the pillar, which is made out of paper and is so weak. It was actually the hand that's holding the bricks up. That's the only reason that it doesn't collapse. And as soon as the hand that goes away and allows it, it's going to collapse. The degree of certainty is gone. And I think one of the things going on for us just now in our nation, in our country, maybe in our community as well, is that the things we've relied on, we've been proved that they're uncertain. We're being kind of exposed in a sense. We've been kind of humbled that actually we can't be self-sufficient, that we can't rely on ourselves, that we're not as clever as we thought we were. And that degree of uncertainty can open us up to understand that there's a bigger story, that actually we need each other, and even perhaps that we need God. And it's an invitation for us to discover a deeper story, and to discover actually where is the foundations that we can really rely on, as we're shown that the foundations that we have been relying on are so uncertain and so fragile. And in the story of Daniel, we've already had twice God gave and God permitted, and then what happened after the invasion is that some of the young nobles, some of the young political leaders, some of the young the best people from the royal family, what they would do is they'd get dragged out of Israel and took all the way to Babylon. And typically what they would do in those days when they invaded a country is you would take the top young leaders out of the country and you would brainwash them, you would train them in your own culture and in your own religion and your own ways, so that eventually they would become leaders, puppet leaders almost, that you'd shape them in your own image and then you could send them back. And so Daniel and his friends are some of the ones who got took out of Israel, and they get taken to Babylon, and they get shaped into the religious teaching of the day and the political teaching and all the philosophy of this foreign land, which was totally against God. And then what happens next is really, really interesting. So then what happens is Daniel and his friends are taken, and their names are changed, which is given names linked to foreign religions. Their dress was changed, their identity, their education, their mindset, their diet, everything was changed to shape into the culture of the day. And the only thing, interestingly, that Daniel and his friends resisted was the diet. They said, we want to eat our simple food, we don't want to eat the foreign food. And it says in verse 9, now God had given the chief of staff both respect and affection for Daniel. Because Daniel went to the chief of staff and said, well, listen, we'll do all the other things, but we don't want to change our diet. We don't want to eat your rich, fancy food. We want to keep with our own simple food. And it says that God had given the chief staff affection and respect for Daniel. Now, we all have a story in uncertainty, and the natural story, if we were watching this, the natural story would be that Daniel was likable, or the chief of staff felt sorry for Daniel, or guilty for what's happened, or there was a bit of chemistry between them, and so he liked him. There would be all sorts of natural explanations for their connection and the influence Daniel had, because eventually the chief of staff allowed him to eat his own diet. But verse 9, this is the third time it's happened in this chapter. It says, God gave the chief of staff respect for Daniel. God gave Nebuchadnezzar victory. God allowed him to take objects from the temple. And then verse 9, it says, God gave him charisma and respect for Daniel. And although we have a human story and the natural causes, it's this idea of the invitation is to see the deeper story of what needs to be discovered. And then it goes on, and if you read in verse 17, you find two more God gives. There's 5 in this chapter in total. We've had 3. And then it says, God gave them amazing aptitude for learning and understanding. Even though they were learning about foreign philosophy and foreign gods, and some of the stuff would be against their faith in God, God still gave them an amazing ability to learn. And then it also says for Daniel, God gave him an amazing ability to have dreams and to understand dreams. And the interesting thing, if you read future chapters, you'll find that this is really laying the groundwork, because God is at work and God is in control. And there's a deeper story where God is still working out his purposes. And there's a natural story about uncertainty, that Nebuchadnezzar invaded and he decided to take the objects, that maybe there was a bit of a connection between Daniel and the chief of staff, and that's why that happened. Maybe in their DNA they were able to learn stuff, and maybe there was something about Daniel's mind that helped him understand dreams. But the deeper story is that God is at work. God gave victory. God allowed the objects to be taken. God brought the relationship and the connection and the influence. God gave them an ability to learn. God gave Daniel the ability to interpret dreams. And what it says is actually there's a deeper story for us to discover. And the way to live with uncertainty is to not to live with the natural explanations, but to discover the deeper story, to discover where God might be at work. And we won't be able to understand all of this because there's still a mystery. You know, why did God allow them to take objects from his temple that would have just disgraced his name? Why would he do that? You know, there'll be a mystery and there'll be puzzling. But God will give us enough of an insight to understand what he's doing, to encourage us and to lift us. So let me just ask you for a minute. Your finances, what's going on just now? From a natural perspective, what's the natural story? And then what's the deeper story that you can discover? What's God's doing? What's God doing within your finances? And what's the natural story about your relationships in your house just now, maybe in your marriage or in with your kids or your parents? You know, what's the natural story? Is it one of stress and tension? Are you all getting on really well? And then to ask, what's the deeper story there, to discover what's God doing? Where's God at work? And what about your relationships outside your house? Maybe with your street or online, those people you're connecting to. And there's a natural story of the people you're getting on well with because you're spending more time together. But what's the deeper story that you can discover? Where's the God gave? Where's the God allowed? Where's the God doing this or God doing that? You know, don't just live as a practical atheist with human explanations, but can you see where God is at work? Can you see what he's doing? And then what about your time? You know, what's God doing with your time and around your prayer life perhaps? There's the natural thing of maybe you've got more time for some of us who are not commuting to work. And but what's God doing? Why does God give you that time just now? What is it he's doing? How is he working out his purposes? And probably you won't understand it all because we're not God. So, I mean, I always find it reassuring when I don't fully understand God because it probably means that he's God. But what is it that you can understand? What, with the Spirit of God, is he giving you understanding of? And if I just give you two examples of how this kind of working out in my own life. You know, I lead Hope Church, and we've moved to a lot of things online because we can't meet in our building. And I remember the first week we got told you can't meet on Sunday. And we decided that we would do a service and we'd stream it and we'd live stream it. And I spoke to a lot of church leaders at that time and they didn't know how to do it, so they weren't going to do it. They were just going to make it simple. But we decided we were going to do it. And it was really difficult. We were up for hours and hours, and it was about 10:30 the night before. We're trying to work out the technology. And we just did it because we thought it would be good for everybody to see us and for us to still connect. And we've been doing that for 3-4 weeks now, perhaps. We've been live streaming on a Sunday morning. And that's the natural explanation, that we couldn't meet physically, so we thought, well, we'll meet digitally. And that's the natural human explanation of what's happened. But there's a deeper story to discover. And so you start saying why we were naturally just trying to fix a problem, that we find that God is at work. That first service we did, I think 4 weeks ago, has had over 600 views on YouTube. And I don't even know who all these people are. I know that there's people watching our service who haven't been to our church for years because they're ill and they can't get out the house. But suddenly now they can be part of what we're doing. I know that there's people on the fringe, people we know who are connected to us, who've not come on a Sunday, but now you're watching our service online. And while the natural explanation is we just needed to move online, that fine, actually God is working out his purposes because he's wanted us as a church to expand our congregation, to reach more people. And one of the things we're trying to do as leaders of Hope Church is trying to catch up with that. And I don't think we're ever going to be the same as a church in terms of how we do church online and how we connect with people, that our reach has got bigger. We've got more groups than we've had before. And one of the things is, well, how does what God want us to connect beyond that? And already we're thinking not just for doing what we're doing now, but actually in quotes, when things get back to normal. How do we respond to what God wants us to do, how he wants us to connect? That's why we've set up an Instagram account. And just this week, we started a new thing called 5 Minutes of Hope. So Thursday lunchtime, for just 5 minutes, we'll upload a video, just a little reflection, probably from one of the leaders of Hope Church. And again, it's just about trying to connect with people and reach out and bring encouragement and give support. And that's partly really just us responding to what God is doing. But what about you? What's your deeper story in your life, in your family? Not just the natural explanations, but what's God doing and how's God at work? And an example personally for me, really, of what's been going on lately and recently. And I have difficult days. I have days when I lack energy and I'm not as disciplined as I might be, and I don't take advantage of opportunities. And but last week I felt prompted. I got an idea of somebody about praying for the church, praying for all you who are part of Hope Church. And I'm not a great prayer. My prayer life is not always that great. But I was longing to be connected to the church. Think, well, how do I support people when I can't go and meet them all and see them all? And I had this idea of just every day for 5 days going for a walk. And when I go for a walk, just to text 15, 20 people in the church, just do letters in the alphabet and just text people and just say, I'm just going for a walk. I'm praying for you today. Anything you want me to pray for? And I just did that every day and prayed for people. And got all sorts of responses back, and I prayed for people, and it was an amazing experience actually, just to have people sharing their prayer requests, and in that moment to pray, and there was such a desire to pray for people. Now, I'll be honest with you and say I've never prayed for every member by name over a 5-day period before. But actually, the disconnect that I felt a little bit and the longing to connect just kind of led to that idea, and to go and pray and just to be connecting with 100, 140 people over 5 days and just praying for them. And there's the natural explanation of we're not connected, but there's always a deeper story, and the deeper story is God's at work. And God is leading you, and God wants to do stuff in your time and in your finances and in your relationships. And I would want to encourage you to like Daniel 1, to see the 5 God gives there of God at work, God at work, God at work, God at work, God at work. 5 times it's mentioned in that chapter. And in your story, exactly the same thing is going on. God is at work. He's doing things and he's working out his purposes. He hasn't lost control. He's not into lockdown. But I wonder whether you can see it. I wonder whether you have seen it, or whether you need to stop and to be open and to ask that question, God, what are you doing? Where are you at work in this situation? What's your purposes? And how can I cooperate with that? And when we see the deeper story, 2 things happen. The first thing that will happen is it will deal with negative emotions of anxiety and panic and fear. Because suddenly, rather than thinking it's all out of control and it's all uncertain, actually we realize that it's not, because God's working out his purposes. And once we start to see that, it deals with some of those emotions and brings a sense of calmness. And the second thing it'll do, once you see what God's doing, is it'll give you a sense of focus. It'll give you something that you can work on, that you can respond to, because once you know God is maybe he's shaking you up because there's a new future he's got for you. Maybe he wants you to be less attached to money so you can be more attached to him. Maybe he wants to invest in the spiritual life of your children. Maybe he wants you to commit more time to prayer. Because whatever he's doing, he always invites you to a response. He invites you to be part of it. And so what it can do is give us a focus in times of uncertainty. God gave. God gave. For Daniel, God gave. God gave 5 times in the chapter. God gave. He was able to see beyond just the natural explanation to the deeper story. He was able to discover what God is doing. My prayer for you is that you'll be able to discover what God is doing in your story, that he'll give you the eyes to see, and that you'll be able to respond to that. Because when you're able to do that, it'll teach you how to live with uncertainty. It'll bring peace and a sense of security that God is at work. And it'll give you a focus so you can respond to whatever he's asking you to do.
Thousand times I feel, still your mercy remains. Should I stumble again, still I'm cold in your grace. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fails. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. Will above all else, my purpose remains. The art of losing myself in bringing you praise. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fails. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. My heart and my soul, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and grace become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. Will above all else, and my purpose remains. The art of losing myself in bringing you praise. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all. My heart and my soul, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all praise. And the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out. My heart and my soul, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out.
Thanks to Graham for sharing that song with us. And as a church, each Sunday we collect an offering which contributes towards all the different activities and all the charities we support as a church. And it's your chance to give towards that now. You can give by text or you can give on our website. And especially if you're somebody who hasn't got a standing order or you don't give regularly to the church, it would be brilliant if you could help contribute to our cost just now, and you could text 785, text HCO20 to give £20, or HCO10 to give £10, and text that to 785. If you want to give more than £20, then just send more than one text and it will all add up. Or you can go onto our website, hopechurchoswestry.org.uk/give, and you can give a one-up donation on that, or you could set up regular if that's what you want to do to support us. And I know many organisations, and probably some of you as well, are facing some financial challenges. And because we don't meet regularly on a Sunday, we have faced some challenges as a church as well. So if you're able to support us financially, that would be really helpful. And it might be that you normally give occasionally on a Sunday, but you want to set up regular giving, then you can do that on our website, Hope Church Oswestry /give. That would be brilliant. Okay, great. Well, thank you for giving financially and contributing to all that we do. And I got something really exciting for you now. We're going to hear from Angela, who's one of the members of our church. And Angela's just going to share a little bit about what God's doing in her life, how he's working with her and in her as she faces the challenges of lockdown. So over to you, Angela.
So, how is God working in my life? This past month, things have been really quite different, I think, for all of us. For me, my days have consisted with being all day, every day with my children. And luckily, we've been blessed, haven't we, with lots of pretty good weather, actually. So we've been spending lots of time outside in our garden. Now, we've got a beautiful garden, but it is very, very small. And one thing about it is that our neighbour's hedge has got to be at least, I'd say, 12 foot tall, and it is really quite big. I don't really always appreciate it because it's quite hard, all the constant cutting back. You can barely reach the top of it off our tallest ladder, and it blocks out the sun quite a lot. So in all honesty, I don't appreciate it. But what we have been enjoying is all of the birds, because the hedge is home to I don't know how many birds, but loads of them, and we've been really enjoying them, popping out, having a bit of a feed off our bird table, and it's been really lovely just watching them. And it has got me really reflecting recently on some of the scriptures in relation to particularly with birds. And maybe one of the things that I've been thinking about obviously is worrying, because it's something we're all doing at the moment, really, is worrying over what's happening, what's going to happen, and everything. And one of the verses has been I've been looking at has been from Matthew chapter 6 from verse 25 onwards, and it is all about do not worry. And it just says these words: "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life?" And at the end it finishes by saying, "Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Now I know that God is my rock, my fortress, my protector, and whenever I worry, God is there for me. He's there for me today, he's there for me tomorrow, and he's there for me in all the days that are to come. And I can choose to cry and be fearful or anxious, or I can choose to let God be with me and let his love surround my life and keep me strong. Now I'm incredibly blessed, I know it, to know God in my life. And he continually works within me to keep me moving forwards to a brighter tomorrow.
Thanks for that, Angela. What an encouragement for us to see God at work in somebody's life. Thank you. Appreciate that very much. We hope you've been encouraged and uplifted by our time together. And there's loads of ways to connect with us during the week. If you haven't already, get onto our YouTube channel and you can hear the messages from our previous weeks. And also we put other things on our YouTube channel every Thursday at 12 o'clock noon. We're putting 5 minutes of hope, which is just a little short reflection. So please get on our YouTube channel and like that. If you're on Facebook, make sure you like our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Hope Church Oswestry. And you can contact us on there as well. And we're putting lots of different things on our Facebook page regularly. We've now got an Instagram account. So if you're on Instagram, search for Hope Church Oswestry on there. And you could email me as well if you want to email me. Because you want some prayer. We've got a prayer team that would love to ring you up and pray with you if you're struggling or you're having particular challenges. And we have lots of groups that meet digitally during the week in Zoom. And if you want to connect into that, if you're not part of a church and you'd like to meet with other people for prayer and just to talk about the Bible and to connect with other people, then we have an open invitation as a church that we're just ordinary people, and anyone who wants to be part is really welcome to journey with us in supporting each other and learning more about God. And I would love to receive your emails if that's what you want to do, and contact me. And so connect with us next Sunday. Every Sunday 11 o'clock we live stream a service. But really get involved with us during the week as well. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love you to be part of what we're doing. Well, that's it. That's the end of our service. I trust you found it helpful and inspiring and encouraging. And just as we finish, I just want to pray for you. And let me just do that now. Maybe you just want to sit quietly for a minute. Maybe close your eyes. Sometimes I find it helpful to pray physically, maybe just to open my hands like that as a sign that I'm open to God. And Father, I just want to pray for each person who's watching this video, wherever they may be, whatever their circumstances. And I pray that you'll give them the spiritual eyes to see the deeper story in their life, that they'll be able to see where you're at work, that they won't just look at their circumstances, but they'll trust that you're working out your purposes, that they'll be able to see that, and that will bring them strength and confidence. That'll bring them peace and joy, and you'll be able to show them what they need to do so they could respond to that, so that they may live life to the full, and they may bless people around them, and they may walk in faith and in strength. Amen. God bless you all. Hopefully see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.